I heard the gunshot while I was drinking my morning coffee. It came from the direction of my cattle pasture. I dropped my mug and ran outside, my heart pounding. When I got to the fence, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. 3 guys with hunting rifles were walking through my field. One of my bulls was lying on the ground, blood pooling around him. The hunters were acting like this was totally normal. And standing there watching them was Karen Henderson from the HOA, with that smug smile she always wore when she thought she was winning. "Hey!" I shouted, climbing over the fence. "What are you doing on my land?" The biggest hunter looked up. "We got permission from the lady here," he said, pointing at Karen. "She said these animals were dangerous and needed to be removed." I heard the gunshot while I was drinking my morning coffee. It came from the direction of my cattle pasture. I dropped my mug and ran outside, my heart pounding. When I got to the fence, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. 3 guys with hunting rifles were walking through my field. One of my bulls was lying on the ground, blood pooling around him. The hunters were acting like this was totally normal. And standing there watching them was Karen Henderson from the HOA, with that smug smile she always wore when she thought she was winning. "Hey!" I shouted, climbing over the fence. "What are you doing on my land?" The biggest hunter looked up. "We got permission from the lady here," he said, pointing at Karen. "She said these animals were dangerous and needed to be removed. My name is Tom Bradley, and I run a small ranch in Texas that's been in my family for 60 years. The cattle in my pasture aren't just any cattle, they're Scottish Highland bulls worth $50,000 each. More importantly, they're a protected heritage breed, which means killing them is a federal crime." Karen didn't know that yet, but she was about to learn. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started. Karen Henderson moved into the fancy neighborhood next to my ranch about 8 months ago. The place is called Meadowbrook Estates, and it's full of big houses with perfect lawns and people who drive expensive cars but have never done a day of real work in their lives. Karen made herself the HOA president within a month of moving in. She's one of those women who thinks being loud equals being right. She's in her 40s, always dressed like she's going to a business meeting, and she treats everyone around her like they work for her. From day one she had problems with my ranch. She complained about the smell, even though my cattle are cleaner than most people's pets. She complained about the noise, even though Highland cattle are naturally quiet animals. She even complained about the sight of them, saying they were unsightly and lowered property values. I tried to be patient with her. I explained that my ranch was here long before her neighborhood existed. I told her about the heritage breed program and how important these animals are for preserving genetic diversity. I even offered to give her a tour so she could see how well cared for they are. Karen wasn't interested in learning. She was only interested in getting rid of what she saw as a problem. For months she tried everything she could think of. She filed complaints with the county about health hazards. She tried to get the city to change zoning laws. She even started a petition to force me to sell my land to developers. Nothing worked because I wasn't doing anything wrong. My ranch is completely legal, properly zoned, and has been operating here since before Karen was born. But Karen Henderson isn't the type of person who gives up easily. When legal methods failed, she decided to try something else. "Tom," she called out as I approached the hunters, "I'm so glad you're here. These gentlemen are helping us solve our dangerous animal problem." "Dangerous animal problem?" I stared at her in disbelief. "Lady, these are Highland cattle. They're about as dangerous as a golden retriever." The hunter who had shot my bull was reloading his rifle. "Ma'am told us these were feral bulls that had been attacking people in the neighborhood." I looked at my dangerous cattle. They were standing in a group about 50 yards away, watching us with the mild curiosity that Highland cattle show toward everything. Their long shaggy coats made them look like gentle giants, which is exactly what they are. "Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "you've just authorized the killing of a $50,000 bull that belongs to a federally protected heritage breed program." For the first time since I'd known her, Karen looked uncertain. "What do you mean, federally protected?" "I mean," I said, pulling out my phone, "that what you just did is a federal crime punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine." The hunters suddenly looked a lot less confident. The big guy lowered his rifle and looked at Karen. "Lady, you told us these were just regular cattle that had gone wild." "They are," Karen insisted, but her voice was getting higher. "They're huge and they have horns and they're clearly dangerous." "They have horns because they're Highland cattle," I explained. "That's what the breed looks like. And dangerous? Watch this." I walked over to the nearest bull, a massive animal named McLeod who weighed about 1,800 pounds. I scratched behind his ears, and he made a soft rumbling sound of contentment. Does this look dangerous to you? I asked the hunters. The three men exchanged glances. They were starting to realize they'd been lied to. Ma'am, the lead hunter said to Karen, I think we need to leave. Now. You can't leave. Karen said, her voice getting shrill. We had a deal. You said you'd remove all the cattle. That was before we knew they were protected animals, the hunter replied. I'm not going to prison because you didn't tell us the truth. The hunters started packing up their gear, but I wasn't about to let them just walk away. Hold on, I said. You killed one of my bulls. That's not something you can just apologize for and leave. Look, mister, the big hunter said, the lady told us these animals were dangerous and that she had authority to have them removed. We thought this was a legitimate operation. I looked at the bull lying dead in my pasture. His name was Hamish and he was one of my best breeding animals. He was also irreplaceable. Whether you thought it was legitimate or not, I said, you just killed a $50,000 animal that's registered with the American Highland Cattle Association and protected under federal law. Karen was looking panicked now. Tom, surely we can work something out. I didn't know they were worth so much money. You didn't bother to find out, I said. You just assumed you could come onto my property and do whatever you wanted. That's when I called the sheriff. Sheriff Martinez arrived about 20 minutes later with 2 deputies. He's a good man who's known my family for years, and he didn't look happy when he saw the dead bull in my pasture. Tom, he said, shaking his head, what happened here? I explained the situation while Karen tried to interrupt every few sentences. The hunters stood quietly, probably hoping they could somehow get out of this without facing charges. Ma'am, Sheriff Martinez said to Karen when I finished, do you have any legal authority over Mr. Bradley's property? I'm the HOA president, Karen said. I have the authority to protect our community from dangerous situations. Your HOA has no jurisdiction over Mr. Bradley's ranch, the sheriff explained patiently. His property isn't part of your development. But the animals are dangerous, Karen insisted. Sheriff Martinez looked at the Highland cattle, who were still standing peacefully in their group. Ma'am, I've been to this ranch many times over the years. These animals are as gentle as house cats. They have horns, Karen said. So do dairy cows, the sheriff replied. That doesn't make them dangerous. The sheriff turned to the hunters. Gentlemen, did you verify that this woman had legal authority to authorize hunting on this property? The lead hunter shifted uncomfortably. She said she was with the HOA and that the animals were dangerous. She showed us some papers. What kind of papers? Sheriff Martinez asked. Karen reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. I have documentation showing that these animals pose a threat to public safety. The sheriff looked through the papers and frowned. Ma'am, these are printouts from the internet about bull attacks. They don't give you any legal authority to do anything. But they prove the animals are dangerous, Karen said. They prove that some bulls in some places have hurt people, the sheriff said. They don't prove anything about Mr. Bradley's specific animals, and they certainly don't give you the right to have them killed. The situation was getting worse for Karen by the minute, but she wasn't ready to give up. Sheriff, she said, putting on her most authoritative voice, I demand that you remove these dangerous animals from our community immediately. Ma'am, Sheriff Martinez said with the patience of a man who deals with difficult people every day, I can't remove animals from private property just because you don't like them. And even if I could, Mr. Bradley's cattle aren't dangerous. How do you know they're not dangerous? Karen demanded. Because, the sheriff said, my daughter has been coming to this ranch since she was 5 years old to pet these exact same animals. Mr. Bradley runs an educational program for local schools. That was true. I'd been hosting school groups for years, teaching kids about heritage breeds and sustainable farming. The Highland cattle were always the star attraction because they're so gentle and photogenic. Karen's face was getting red. I don't care about your daughter or school groups. These animals are a threat to property values and quality of life in our community. Now we're getting to the real issue, Sheriff Martinez said. This isn't about safety. This is about property values. Yes, Karen said. These animals are ruining our investment in our homes. Ma'am, the sheriff said, your investment problems don't give you the right to trespass on someone else's property and destroy their livestock. The sheriff then turned to me. Tom, do you want to press charges? I looked at Karen, who was still standing there in her perfect business suit, surrounded by the chaos she'd created. Then I looked at my dead bull. Yes, I said. I want to press charges against all of them. Wait, Karen said. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. Ma'am, Sheriff Martinez said. Being HOA president doesn't put you above the law. But I was trying to protect the community. You were trespassing and conspiring to destroy protected animals, the sheriff explained. That's a crime regardless of your motivation. The hunters were arrested for illegal hunting and destruction of protected livestock. Karen was arrested for conspiracy, trespassing, and filing false reports. As they were being led away in handcuffs, Karen shouted back at me, "This isn't over, Tom. I'll fight this in court." "Good luck with that," I called back. After everyone left, I stood alone in my pasture with Hamish's body. He'd been a gentle giant, one of the smartest bulls I'd ever owned. Kids loved him because he was so calm and friendly. Now he was dead because of one woman's selfishness and ignorance. But Karen had made a big mistake. She thought she was dealing with just some simple rancher who would be intimidated by her threats and her lawyers. She had no idea that she'd just messed with someone who knew exactly how to fight back. The next morning, I made a series of phone calls that would change everything. The first call was to Dr. Sarah Kim, the federal wildlife officer who managed the Heritage Breed Protection Program. She'd been working with me for 5 years to maintain the genetic records of my Highland cattle. "Tom," she said when I explained what had happened, "this is exactly the kind of incident we've been trying to prevent." "How many animals were killed?" "Just one, but it was Hamish. Bull number HC2847. There was a long pause. "Tom, that animal was one of only 12 bulls in the country with that specific genetic lineage. His loss is catastrophic for the breeding program." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm calling you." "I'll be there tomorrow," Dr. Kim said. "This is now a federal case." My second call was to the American Highland Cattle Association. As soon as I explained what had happened, they transferred me to their legal department. "Mr. Bradley," the lawyer said, "the association takes attacks on heritage breeds very seriously. We'll be providing full legal support for any criminal and civil proceedings." My third call was to my insurance company. The agent who handled my livestock policy wasn't surprised to hear from me. "Tom, I heard about the incident on the police scanner. How much coverage do you have on that bull?" "Hamish was insured for $75,000. "Okay, I'll start the paperwork." "But Tom, given that this was intentional destruction by a third party, the insurance company will definitely be going after the responsible parties for reimbursement." By the end of the day, I had federal wildlife officers, livestock association lawyers, and insurance investigators all interested in Karen's case. She thought she was just dealing with a simple rancher, but she'd actually picked a fight with the entire heritage livestock protection system. The next few days brought developments that made me smile for the first time since Hamish's death. Dr. Kim arrived with a team of federal investigators. They documented everything: the crime scene, the genetic value of the killed animal, and the impact on the heritage breed program. "Mr. Bradley," Dr. Kim told me after finishing her investigation, "this case is going to set an important precedent. Mrs. Henderson and her accomplices destroyed an irreplaceable genetic resource that belonged not just to you, but to the entire country." The federal charges were much more serious than the local ones. Karen was now facing up to 10 years in federal prison for destroying protected wildlife. But the legal troubles were just the beginning of Karen's problems. The story hit the local news first, then went viral on social media. The headline, "HOA President Authorizes Killing of Rare Heritage Bulls," spread across the internet like wildfire. Agricultural groups were outraged. Animal rights organizations were furious. Even people who didn't care about cattle were angry about someone abusing their authority to destroy irreplaceable animals. Karen tried to do damage control with a press conference, but it backfired spectacularly. "I was protecting our community from dangerous animals," she told the reporters. Mr. Bradley's cattle posed a clear threat to public safety. "Ma'am," one reporter asked, "these were Scottish Highland cattle, which are known for being gentle. Why did you think they were dangerous?" "They're huge and they have horns," Karen said. "Any animal with horns is dangerous." "Ma'am, are you aware that dairy cows have horns?" "That's different," Karen said, but she couldn't explain how. "Ma'am, are you aware that the animal that was killed was worth $75,000 and was part of a federal heritage breed protection program?" "No," Karen admitted. "But Mr. Bradley should have told us they were expensive. Why would he need to tell you anything about animals on his own property?" Karen's press conference became a viral video, shared millions of times with captions like, "Karen doesn't understand property rights," and "HOA president thinks cows are dangerous." The negative publicity was devastating for Meadowbrook Estates. Property values in the development started dropping as potential buyers decided they didn't want to live in a community run by someone who made such poor decisions. The other HOA members were furious with Karen. Within a week, they'd called an emergency meeting and voted her out as president. Karen, the new HOA president, told her, "Your actions have exposed the association to massive legal liability. We're removing you from all positions of authority effective immediately." Karen's response was typical. "You can't do this to me. I was protecting the community. You were destroying valuable property based on your personal prejudices," the new president replied. "The association is now facing multiple lawsuits because of your actions." That was true. In addition to my lawsuit, the Highland Cattle Association was suing the HOA for the destruction of irreplaceable genetic resources. The federal government was considering a civil rights lawsuit for violation of my property rights. Karen tried to fight back by hiring an expensive lawyer, but her case was hopeless. There was no legal defense for what she'd done. The criminal trial lasted 3 days. Karen's lawyer tried to argue that she genuinely believed the cattle were dangerous, but the prosecution had too much evidence against her. They showed video of children petting the Highland bulls during school visits. They brought in expert witnesses who testified about the gentle nature of the breed. They presented evidence that Karen had never bothered to research the animals before authorizing their destruction. Most damaging of all, they played recordings of Karen's phone calls to the hunters where she admitted that her real motivation was protecting property values, not public safety. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Karen guilty on all charges. "Mrs. Henderson," the judge said during sentencing, "you abused a position of trust to destroy irreplaceable animals that belong to a federal heritage protection program. Your actions were motivated not by legitimate safety concerns, but by personal prejudice and financial self-interest." Karen was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution of $200,000 to cover the cost of the destroyed bull, legal expenses, and damages to the heritage breeding program. The hunters received lighter sentences because they'd been lied to by Karen, but they still faced fines and probation. The civil lawsuit was settled out of court for an amount that my lawyer advised me not to discuss publicly. Let's just say it was enough to expand my ranch and buy several new breeding bulls. But the best outcome was what happened to the heritage breed program itself. The publicity from the case brought national attention to the importance of preserving rare livestock breeds. Donations poured in from around the country to support heritage breed conservation. The American Highland Cattle Association used the settlement money to establish the Hamish Memorial Fund, which provides grants to small ranchers who want to raise heritage breeds. Dr. Kim told me that applications for the heritage breed program had tripled since the case made headlines. "Tom," she said, "Hamish's death was a tragedy, but it's led to the greatest expansion of heritage breed protection in the program's history." 6 months after the trial, I was standing in the same pasture where Hamish had died, watching my new bulls graze peacefully in the morning sun. The herd was larger now, with genetic lines I'd been trying to acquire for years. A school bus pulled up at the gate, and 30 elementary school kids piled out for their monthly visit to meet the Highland cattle. This was their favorite field trip and mine too. "Mr. Bradley," one little girl asked, "why do your cows have such long hair?" "Well," I said, "they're actually bulls, not cows. And they have long hair because they come from Scotland, where it's very cold and wet." "Can I pet them?" "Of course," I said. "Just be gentle." The children spent an hour brushing the bulls and feeding them treats. The animals loved the attention, standing patiently while dozens of small hands petted their shaggy coats. One of the new bulls, a magnificent animal I'd named Hamish II in honor of his predecessor, was particularly gentle with the kids. He lowered his massive head so they could scratch behind his ears, making the same rumbling sound of contentment that his namesake used to make. As the children climbed back onto their bus, the teacher thanked me for the educational program. "Mr. Bradley," she said, "this is the highlight of our year. The children learned so much about agriculture and animal care." "It's my pleasure," I said. "These animals are meant to be shared." That evening I got a phone call that made me smile. "Tom, this is Janet Wilson, the new HOA president at Meadowbrook Estates." "Hello, Janet. What can I do for you?" "Well," she said, "the board was wondering if you'd be interested in doing an educational presentation for our community. A lot of our residents have never seen Highland cattle up close, and we think it would help people understand what wonderful animals they are." "I'd be happy to," I said. "Great. And Tom, I want to apologize for what Karen put you through. The whole community is embarrassed by her actions." "Thank you, Janet. I appreciate that." 2 weeks later, I gave a presentation to about 50 residents of Meadowbrook Estates. I brought along Hamish 2 and 2 other gentle bulls, and let people meet them up close. The reaction was amazing. People who had been afraid of the cattle because of Karen's lies discovered that Highland bulls are gentle giants who love attention. "Mr. Bradley," one man told me, "I can't believe we let that woman convince us these animals were dangerous. They're like big hairy dogs." "That's exactly what they are," I said. By the end of the evening, several residents had asked about bringing their children for private visits. Others wanted to know how they could support heritage breed conservation. One elderly woman approached me as I was loading the bulls back into their trailer. "Mr. Bradley," she said, "I need to tell you something. I was one of the people who signed Karen's petition to have your ranch shut down." I looked at her in surprise. "Oh, I'm ashamed of that now," she continued. "I believed her lies about dangerous animals without bothering to find out the truth." "I'm sorry." "It's okay," I said. Karen was very convincing. "No, it's not okay," the woman replied. "I should have done my own research instead of just believing what someone else told me. I promise I'll never make that mistake again." As I drove home that night with the bulls safely loaded in their trailer, I thought about how much had changed since that terrible morning when I heard the gunshot. Karen Henderson had tried to destroy my ranch and my livelihood because she thought my cattle were an inconvenience. She'd assumed that her position as HOA president gave her the right to make decisions about other people's property. She'd been wrong about everything. The Highland cattle weren't dangerous. They were gentle giants who loved human attention. They weren't worthless farm animals. They were irreplaceable genetic resources worth tens of thousands of dollars each. And Karen's authority as HOA president didn't extend beyond the boundaries of her own development. Most importantly, she'd underestimated the community that would rally to protect heritage breeds and property rights. The case had brought together federal wildlife officers, agricultural organizations, and ordinary people who understood that what happened to me could happen to anyone. When someone abuses their authority to destroy other people's property, everyone's rights are threatened. Karen was serving her prison sentence now, probably still convinced that she'd been right and everyone else was wrong. Some people never learn. But her actions had accomplished something she never intended. They'd brought national attention to the importance of heritage breed conservation and shown that communities will stand up to protect what's right. Every morning when I walk out to check on my cattle, I think about Hamish and the sacrifice he unknowingly made. His death was senseless and tragic, but it led to something bigger than any of us. The Highland bulls graze peacefully in the same pasture where Karen's hunters killed their predecessor. They're living proof that beauty and gentleness can survive in a world that sometimes seems determined to destroy both. And every time a school bus pulls up to my gate, bringing children to meet the cattle for the first time, I know that Hamish's legacy is secure. The heritage breeds will survive. The land will be protected. And people like Karen Henderson will learn that there are consequences when you mess with things that don't belong to you. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always finds a way.